Mr. President,
Senator from Delaware.
as you know, we have a term called seatmates. And for years, this man has been my seatmate, and I've never been prouder of him for all that you do. God bless you. Wonderful to be your friend and colleague. Well, Mr. President, thank you very much, and to our colleagues that are coming in to join us. In just a few weeks, I'm going to be stepping down as one of Delaware's two United States senators, ending a half-century of service in the United States Navy and in elective office. God willing, in the weeks that follow, Martha, my bride of 38, is sitting right up there, and I will turn the page and hit the road together, visiting family members near and far and exploring parts of America that we've yet to see before beginning to look for new ways to serve the people of Delaware and our country. Recently, a friend told me that I have lived a charmed life, and you know what? He is right. I've been truly blessed, although if truth be known, it didn't start that way. My sister Sheila and I were born in a coal mining town in West Virginia. We didn't have much, but we had the good fortune of being raised in a home by parents who instilled in us a strong work ethic, along with a deep faith that embraced the golden rule to treat other people the way that we want to be treated. Our parents also instilled in us an abiding love for our country and for this planet that we call home. Our father and most of our uncles served in World War II or in Korea or both. Our mother's youngest brother, Bob Patton, was killed at the age of 19 in a kamikaze attack on his aircraft carrier in the Pacific in 1944. His body was never recovered. Our grandmother was a Gold Star mother. This life-size, bigger than life-size picture of him in his dress blue still hangs in my Senate office here on Capitol Hill. He was my hero when I was a kid growing up, and if truth be known, he still is. Our parents never went to college, but they wanted us to go, and they expected my sister and I to figure out how to pay for it. Fortunately, in my senior year in high school, I won a Navy ROTC scholarship, and with the help of that scholarship, I was able to work a couple of jobs at Ohio State, and including washing pots and pans, and in order to keep from starving. And I graduated at the height of the Vietnam War, and would go on to complete 3 tours of duty in Southeast Asia as a naval flight officer, and eventually as a Navy P-3 aircraft mission commander. The best days of the week for us on those 6-month deployments were the days that the mail came, bringing cards, care packages, newspapers, and magazines. And following the 1972 election, the issues of both Time and Newsweek included stories of a stunning upset in Delaware, where a 29-year-old upstart named Joe Biden defeated an icon, a Delaware icon named Caleb Boggs. And I remember literally on the other side of the world thinking, I'd like to meet that young guy someday and see what he's made of. And then one day, that's what I did. Later on, and I would enroll after I fulfilled my military obligation. I enrolled in the University of Delaware's MBA program. Within a week of enrolling, I affiliated with the Reserve Navy P-3 aircraft squadron in nearby Pennsylvania, and I found a place to live in Delaware. Shortly thereafter, I had just a chance meeting with a professor at the University of Delaware on campus there who was planning to run for Congress, and I got to know him. And later, not much later, he asked me to be his campaign treasurer, and I agreed. I think I'd been in Delaware for like a couple of months, and I found myself as a campaign treasurer all of a sudden. Miraculously, I was invited a month or two after that to join a pep talk and a strategy session at the home of none other than Delaware's junior senator, Joe Biden. And that day, he could not have been more gracious, more helpful. And after learning of my military service in Southeast Asia, he embraced me and welcomed me to Delaware, marking the beginning of a friendship that has lasted for 50 years. Following the completion of my MBA studies, I went to work in economic development for the state of Delaware. Less than a year later, when no Democrat volunteered to run for state treasurer, I offered to run and was elected state treasurer at the age of 29, on the same day that Republican Pete DuPont was elected our state's governor. When I called my parents in Florida and told them that I'd been elected state treasurer at 29, they said, "You don't even know how to spell cash management. How are you going to do that?" And 2 months later, in his very first State of the State address in Legislative Hall, Governor Pete DuPont, announced that the state of Delaware was bankrupt. And later that week, Delaware's credit rating fell to the lowest of any state in America. There I was, 29 years old, and I thought, what do I do now? Well, as it turned out, even though I didn't know a lot about cash management, the end of the story is pretty good one. And we may not have known a lot in those days about cash management, but what we did have, fortunately, on our side was a new governor who quickly put together a talented team to turn our state around, and he invited me, a Democrat of all things, to become part of that team. And remarkably, it worked. It worked. In less than 4 years later, Delaware's credit rating was about to be raised to a respectable AA, after we'd been literally at the bottom, to be all ready to go to AA within a couple of years. And the governor asked me, of all people, to announce to the world that our credit rating is being raised to AA. And following that announcement, I made the announcement, got a lot of attention. But in the regularly scheduled election a week later, the people of Delaware elected me to serve as their lone congressman, unseating the incumbent Republican, and the rest, as they say, is history. So what lessons might we all take from this? For me, one lesson was that our elected leaders surround themselves with the best people they could find. Another key lesson was that in adversity lies opportunity. I probably said that about 1 million times. In adversity lies opportunity. Third lesson was the importance of job creation, and the realization is that while our elected leaders don't create jobs, we help create a nurturing environment that supports job creation. In addition, I learned from Joe Biden that all politics is personal and that all diplomacy is personal. And I learned that just because someone is your adversary one day, they don't have to become your enemy. They don't have to become your enemy. And I also learned an ancient proverb that some of you have heard along the way, and it goes something like this: if you give a person a fish, you can feed them for a day. If you teach a person to fish, they can feed themselves and their families for a lifetime. Since announcing over a year ago that I would not be running for re-election, I've had a number of interviews, and among the questions that have been asked of me, a lot of that you might have been asked yourselves, but one of the questions is, why did you decide not to run for re-election? And I tell them with tongue in cheek, only partly in cheek, that I was following the advice of singer-songwriter Kenny Rogers, whom I met my senior year at Ohio State, trying to get him and his group to come do a concert at Ohio State. And I'd meet him again as governor at Delaware 30 years later. He was the second best male recording artist in history. And I met him again at the state fair 30 years later. He did not remember me, meeting me at Ohio State. But he asked me if there's a song that I'd like for him to sing and dedicate to me that night at the state fair with like 10,000 people in the stands. I said, that'd be great. And I asked him to sing the Gambler. You got to know when to hold them, got to know when to fold them. And when I announced with Martha by my side years later that those words, and I announced I wasn't going to run, I gave a little tribute to Kenny Rogers, and he's getting another shout out here today. But among the questions that I've also been asked of late is, what are you proudest of in your 24 years in the Senate? And one of them is building a trusting partnership on the Environment and Public Works Committee with the ranking member, Shelley Carper, who's just sitting right over there. His father was governor of Delaware when my sister and I were born in West Virginia. And Shelley, like me, is a native West Virginian. Our committee enjoys a well-deserved reputation as a workhorse committee and one whose members consistently work across the aisle. Our relationship has enabled us, among other things, to craft a comprehensive two-year Water Resources Development Act, which includes the authorization and reauthorization of the Economic Development Administration. We've also learned to and work to advance a package of critical recycling bills to confirm important nominations and to enact transformational legislation like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the most transformational infrastructure law in the history of our country. And she and I managed this bill right out here on the floor. And also to pass significant nuclear legislation like the ADVANCE Act and major legislation to reduce powerful greenhouse gas emissions known as F, Cs, hydrofluorocarbons, and that is just a few. And we've demonstrated time and time again that bipartisan solutions are lasting solutions. And even in today's polarized environment, it's still possible to accomplish a great deal for our country, for our planet, and for our citizens. There's a lot that we've helped accomplish in this Senate, but there remains unfinished business, as you know, that I want to encourage our colleagues to continue once I weigh anchor, it's a Navy phrase, weigh anchor and sail off into the sunrise. Almost daily, I'm asked here in D.C. and in Delaware, how do you like being retired? How do you like being retired? I'm not retired. And I hope I'm never truly retired. And I smile and tell people I hope I want to find other ways where I can continue to make a difference for as long as I live. In truth, I've spent many years helping to lead the effort to combat global warming, as some of you know. Many of you have been partners in that important effort. In Delaware, we're especially aware of the effects of climate crisis, and our state is sinking. Our state is sinking, and the seas around us are rising. That's not a good combination. And like much of our country, we're experiencing intensifying storms and scorching heat waves. My wife just spent a part of last month in North Carolina, western North Carolina, and just saw the devastation that's been wreaked on her hometown many weeks ago. And that's why I worked so hard to help pass the Inflation Reduction Act with some of you, which is a prime example of a package that reduces, on the one hand, the cost of prescription medicines, while also helping us to fight the climate crisis, and just as important, creating hundreds of thousands of new American jobs, good-paying American jobs. The night that we voted here in this chamber on that bill, we stayed up all night. We finished up at about 6 in the morning. As many of you recall, it passed by one vote. And that one vote was cast by our Vice President Kamala Harris, who was presiding over the Senate. About 6 o'clock in the morning, I walked back to my office, headed down to the train station to catch a train and go back to Delaware. And I got there about 7:30, got off the train. And I thought on my way home, maybe I should just go by Wawa. And for people who don't have an idea who Wawa is, there's convenience stores up and down the East Coast that people have just a great affection for. And I went by Wawa to pick up a cup of coffee kind of to celebrate before I went home. And it's about 8 o'clock in the morning. And the lady who was a cashier, I got a small cup of coffee, and I went to pay for it. And she said, I'll never forget, she said, your money's no good for a small cup of coffee. That's what she said. Your money's no good for a small cup of coffee. And I said, could I get a bigger cup of coffee? And she said, no, your money's no good for a small cup of coffee. So I made do on a small cup of coffee. But then she went on to say this. She said, you've been up all night, haven't you? I said, yes. She said, I know what you've been doing, haven't you? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, I have a son and a daughter. And I want to make sure that they have a planet to grow up on and a planet to grow old on. And for all of us who have children, or maybe nieces or nephews or grandchildren, the idea to make sure that we want to make sure that they do have a planet to grow up on and a planet to grow old on. We also want to make sure that they have jobs, good jobs, so they can support themselves and their families. Now, this says I'm supposed to conclude. I'm not finished, so. This is crazy. In any event, let me conclude. I'm not quite done, but let me conclude with a couple of thoughts relating to a date that just passed, and that was December 7th. That's a date that in our state is well known. It's called Delaware Day, and it's a celebration of December 7th, 1787, the day that the people of Delaware ratified through their 25 representatives the Constitution before anybody else had. Delaware ratified the Constitution. We became the first state. And I hope that years from now, we'll continue to celebrate Delaware Day in my home state and frankly in other places too. And I hope that people across our nation will continue to be inspired by the words of our founding fathers. As many of our colleagues have heard me say here on this floor in the past, Ben Franklin was asked as he was exiting the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787. He was asked, he said, Mr. Franklin, what have you wrought here? What have you created here? And he said famously, a republic if we can keep it. A republic if we can keep it. The brevity of that response should not cause us to undervalue its essential meaning. Democratic republics are not merely founded upon the consent of the people, but they are absolutely dependent upon the active and informed involvement of the people for the continued health of our democracy. And while there were many things that our founding fathers disagreed upon, the one thing that they all agreed on is that they didn't want America to ever be ruled by a king. They wanted to make sure that it never happened. And you know what? We still feel that way today. When we pledge allegiance to the flag or take an oath to defend the Constitution against its amendments, foreign and domestic, we don't pledge our allegiance to a person or to a party. We pledge our allegiance to our country and to the Constitution under which we were established. Let me just close, if I can, I want to thank all of my current and former staff members for joining Carper. A bunch of them are here today, and a lot are watching as well. Somebody came up with the word Carper. I don't know who, but I love it. And it's kind of like remember the song by the Eagles, Hotel California, you could check out, but you could never leave. Carpertown is like that. There's a lot of people in Carpertown. And for people that work with me in the Navy and state treasurer, congressman, governor, senator, and even to today. But I want to ask unanimous consent that all the names of my Senate staff here and back in Delaware be included in the congressional record. I also want to take a moment, if I could, to thank my family, Martha, who's seated right up here to my right. And over the years, I've spoken with members of the armed forces who are married, and I have not only thanked them for their service, but I've also thanked their spouses for their service. And you got the person in the uniform, spouse not wearing a uniform, but that spouse has served just as much as a person in uniform. And I want to just say that during the years that I've been privileged to serve as a naval officer, as a congressman, as a governor, treasurer, senator, and all, my wife Martha has served as well as I have, and we are in her debt, and God knows I am in her debt. Martha, thank you. I love you. I'm also proud to have helped raise 3 boys who've gone on to become terrific young men that any parent would be proud to call their own. And I also want to salute those who have served alongside me representing Delaware, including members of the Delaware congressional delegation over the years, people like Ted Kaufman. I'm sure our leader here remembers Ted, who succeeded Joe Biden, and Mike Castle, who was a House member and a governor of the state, John Carney, our governor, who's a former congressman and gone on to be mayor of Wilmington pretty soon, and Joe Biden. So those are just some of the people I've gotten to serve with in the House and the Senate. But I especially want to note my fellow Senator Chris Coons. And Chris is sitting over my right shoulder. How you doing, bud? We call each other, we call it a lot of things, but one of them is wingman. And he's my wingman, and I'm his as well. He's always had my back, and I'll always have his. Chris is one of the smartest people, one of the brightest people I think I've ever worked with. He surrounds himself with terrific people as well. He's a senior member of the Foreign Relations Committee, and he's traveled the world, and he knows the world's leaders like I think none of us ever have. He calls Delaware home, and I know he'll continue to represent our state very, very well. And now let me just mention our Senator-elect. I don't know if she's here today. Hi, Lisa. Lisa Blunt Rochester. Lisa is a beloved member of the United States House of Representatives, where she serves as a highly effective member of a much sought-after committee, and that is the Energy and Commerce Committee. But many years ago, she joined my congressional team as an intern. And from that humble beginning, she went on to become a 2-time cabinet member when I was governor of the state of Delaware. She is smart, is a caring daughter, sister, mother, and now a grandmother too. She leads an excellent staff and has a can-do attitude as well as a deep faith. And she's also a great dancer, for what it's worth. And when my Senate colleagues said to me, TC, it's a lot of people here call me TC, but some call me other things. But, but when they say, TC, we're really going to miss you in the Senate, I say to them, 2 weeks after Lisa Blunt Rochester joins you in the Senate, you won't remember my name. And they say, oh, yes, we will, yes, we will. I don't know that I believe them, but it's nice of them to say that. And in closing, just once again, let me thank the people of Delaware for entrusting in me the responsibility of serving them for all of these years. It has been a privilege. It's been a source of great joy that I will always cherish. And I want to say to our leader, before I close, thank you very much for your kind words earlier this morning. One of the things that I understand he mentioned is our love for music and music lyrics. So with that in mind, let me close with this. With apologies to Neil Young of Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, let me end with this. Keep on rocking in the free world. Keep on rocking in the free world. It's been my joy to be your colleague, and I'm looking forward to getting to keep knowing all of you and working with you in Delaware. If we can ever be of help or support in any way at all, you know we want to. God bless you all. Thank you so much.